In life's journey, we must seek to reflect, learn, and grow. Welcome to the Road to Rediscovery with your host, Aubrey Johnson.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Road to Rediscovery. I'm your host, Aubrey Johnson. The Road to Rediscovery is about reflecting on past life lessons to learn and grow from them and to take it to the next level and help others who are struggling through dark times. My special guest has forged an incredible journey and is keeping the momentum with her amazing work. She's a presenter, a retreat leader, and has walked the path of sobriety for 35 years and counting. She's earned a Stanford PhD and recently authored her award-winning book, 50 Ways to Worry Less Now: Reject Negative Thinking to Find Peace, Clarity, and Connection. She's endured tremendous challenges and barriers, gathered the lessons from them, and developed practical tools to access calm, wisdom, direction, and hope in all circumstances. She's helping others achieve the same, and we're going to learn more about her. So let's welcome Gigi Langer to the show. Hey, Gigi, how are you today? Welcome.
I'm great. Thank you. Really glad to be here, Aubrey. Thanks so much for having me as a guest.
Oh, no, thank you. We reciprocate. We appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to chat with us here. So let's just go ahead and dive in. If you can share with people your upbringing, where you're from, and what was life like for Gigi growing up?
Oh, wow. Well, I'm from the western suburbs of Chicago,
Mm-hmm.
and I was the youngest of four. I came
Mm-hmm.
out of the womb highly sensitive in a very gregarious family where nothing seemed to bother any of them.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, my dad was a high functioning alcoholic, and so there was a lot of, you know, my mom waiting for him to come home and very kind of depressed on her bed, waiting
Right.
and uncertainty and
Mm.
just it was an uncertain environment, and I being a little more sensitive was more prone to feel insecure. I think I just
Right.
so that kind of set me on the path of looking into the world for love and looking
Sure.
for love in all the wrong places.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I one of the first things I found some good feelings about myself was at school. So I
Okay.
got good grades and I liked that the teacher approved of me and I started feeling worthwhile and worthy
Right.
of people's attention. So of
Right.
course I have every degree you could possibly get.
Sure. Yeah.
and and then in my teen years I discovered boys,
Oh yeah. That
and
happens.
that was just wonderful to fall in love. And
Mm-hmm.
and so I had a series, and one of the hardships I endured was not being able to get relationships to last. So I
I
had
see.
three marriages and
Mm-hmm.
two living together relationships for multiple years, all
Mm-hmm.
of which crashed and burned by the time I was in my late 30s.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so I
Yeah.
had real issues with how to give and receive love,
Mm-hmm.
and I
Mm-hmm.
didn't know it, but it was dawning on me as the divorces piled up. And in my third marriage, I was uh, moved to Michigan, and I had this new degree, and I got the guy that I thought really had it together.
Mm-hmm.
And within a year of marrying him, he would be traveling quite a bit, and I was going out to bars and picking up strangers and going
Oh.
home with them,
Oh, I see.
and getting marijuana, and
Yeah.
that was really dangerous behavior.
Oh yeah.
But
Absolutely.
I got to Michigan. I didn't know anybody, so I went looking for adventure.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't have any marijuana, which was my drug of choice because I got horrible hangovers.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so I found it that way.
Mm-hmm.
So after doing that for a year or two, I was really grossed out, and I went to a therapist.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "What is wrong with this picture? I have this great job, this degree, and my private life is seedy and secret. And
Yes.
and it's my third marriage, you know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And he said, well, you're in the early stages of alcoholism.
Mm,
And,
mm,
I thought that can't be true because sometimes I have two beers or two glasses of wine. I don't drink hard liquor.
right.
I have two drinks and I would stop. But other times I didn't. And
Mm,
then, I would find the marijuana and other drugs. So he suggested if I wanted to know if I had a problem with alcohol and whether I might need to look at that,
mm-hmm,
for me to have two drinks, no more, no less, every
right.
day, and to observe my own behavior.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
And I did that, and sure enough, sometimes I would have the two beers and stop, and other times I would have the third and the fourth and the fifth and
mm-hmm,
change to something else and go
mm-hmm,
and find drugs and close the bar down or go off with a stranger.
mm-hmm,
And here was the thing, I couldn't predict when it was going to happen. So
mm.
I might have two drinks and stop, or I might have create a really crazy alcoholic kind of night for myself.
And there was no pattern at all with this, right? It wouldn't be like on two consecutive occasions, you would drink more than two, and then maybe two or three after that, you would just have two and call it a night.
Yeah, I couldn't find a pattern.
No.
I'm
Okay.
sure, I mean, at that point, I was so out of touch with my emotional self
I see.
that if one had asked me to find a pattern, I was busily trying to start a career in academia,
Mm-hmm.
trying to pretend to be the kind of wife that my third husband wanted,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
feeling very confined and still with kind of all these holes in me that I didn't know existed, uh, that made it very hard for me to be, honest and dependable and a good wife, because I
Yeah.
had all
Yeah.
these things going on. So it was only later that I realized that, there I was trying to find, as I said, love in all the wrong places.
Right, right. And you explain it and describe it so vividly, Gigi, and I really appreciate you for sharing it that way. Because I
Thanks.
do want my listeners to just visualize in their mind's eye what you were doing, some of the behaviors and the habits, and it's relative for a lot of us, right? It really is. Um, Now, did you find yourself, and I know hindsight's 2020, but did you find yourself more, I guess, um, outward focused than introspective during the early times or years of that period?
When I was using alcohol and
Yeah,
drugs,
yeah.
yeah, well, I was working really hard to get my, well, I mean, it didn't start, well, I have to say, in my late 20s and early 30s, there were really very few episodes
Mm-hmm.
of out of control drinking,
Right.
here or there. But when I
Mm-hmm.
got in grad school and I thought, what the hell am I doing with all these smart people?
Yeah.
And then the stress really mounted up, and of
Mm-hmm.
course I found a guy whom I lived with,
Mm-hmm.
um, who grew his own marijuana and had, we had a bar that we met in every night.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say that I was not outgoing until I had a drink or two. That I
Gotcha.
was, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, gotcha. So you mentioned at one point after a year or two, when you started to feel gross about things, you went to a therapist. Was this a gradual feeling that started to come over you in that year to 2 years, or was there a defining moment that just made you think like, "Oh man, what in the world am I doing? What in the world's wrong with me? I need to see a therapist." How did that change or that shift in mindset happen for you?
Well, good question. I, I always felt extra lonely and extra needful of romance,
Mm-hmm.
whether I was in a relationship or not, in
Mm-hmm.
the spring.
Mm-hmm.
So one of those springs, being married. Always before I had gone out to the bars when he was traveling and out of town.
Okay.
But there was one spring evening. Actually, I had gone to a therapist before the one who said you're in the early stages of alcoholism. And he
Okay.
had me lying on a couch facing away from him. Later, I found out that I had some sexual touching issues in my childhood. And so no wonder I was so uncomfortable lying on a couch with this man.
Yes.
Of course, I didn't tell him how much I drank. I thought, I mean, they did not help at all. So one spring afternoon, the story starts my book, or begins my book. I leave his office and I go to a bar in Ann Arbor.
Mm.
And I sit, it's 4 p.m. or so, and I sit in the stool looking at the bottles, and part of me almost consciously, it was pissed, because
Yes. Yes.
nothing had helped. I felt worse.
Yes.
And I thought, I'm just going to get drunk and see what
Mm.
happens.
Mm.
My husband was in town. He was not out of town.
Oh.
So I'm sitting at this bar,
Mm-hmm.
and a couple of businessmen come in after work, and we start talking and chatting. And I call my husband and say that I had met at the bar with some of my students and I'd be home in a few hours. Then a few hours later, I call my husband and say da 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 da. And
Right.
then I'm going home. Well, I'm going somewhere really seedy to buy drugs with this guy I picked up,
Yeah.
and going to his home and sleeping with him and
Oh
doing
wow.
cocaine
Oh wow.
and driving home at 2 a.m. Imagine what my husband thought.
Right.
I mean, that that was, well, and I endangered myself and everybody else on the road too.
Mm-hmm.
That
Mm-hmm.
was a turning point for me where I thought, okay, that therapist isn't helping at all, but I need
Right.
help somehow because this just escalated.
Mm.
And
Man.
so that's when I went to the second therapist who really did
Gotcha.
help because he
Yeah.
knew about substance abuse.
Right. Right.
Mhm.
And that's I mean you have to connect with someone if you're looking for help who understands that, right? Understands
Okay.
substance abuse, understands what it does to us behaviorally, and you know everything that you have shared with him, I'm sure, he was able to diagnose, okay, well, yeah, this is the issue and the problem, and this is where or what stage in that problem you're at, and then knowing that they can and I'm assuming he did give you like a roadmap. I mean, I understand when it comes to alcoholism there's the 12-step program and everything, but were you given a roadmap in transforming yourself and turning things around, and if so, at what point did you realize within yourself that you knew that, hey, I can beat this. This is not who I really am. I have so much more potential to be a lot more than who I am. This should not define me. What was that point
Mm.
in working with your therapist?
Yeah, I was seeing that therapist for 6 months while I was experimenting.
Yeah. Oh,
So
uh
we
huh.
were building trust.
Yes.
We tried to get my husband to come to sessions. He came occasionally.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that therapist defended my smoking marijuana at home recreationally to
Mm-hmm.
my husband,
Uh huh.
which was very interesting. And so eventually, once I finished my 6 month experiment, and I realized honestly that if I have one drink at all, I could do something really awful for
Right.
someone else or for me. And definitely, I was harming my marriage. My
Right.
husband may have suspected, but he didn't know any details about what I had been doing.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, in 1986, the main the main show in town for recovery was Alcoholics Anonymous.
Mm-hmm.
So I went
Mm-hmm.
to a 12-step program.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, that third husband was instrumental. He had been going to Al-Anon, which
Mm.
is a 12-step program for the loved ones of alcoholics who
Right.
are going nuts around the disease
Yes.
and want to learn how to not make the disease worse
Mm-hmm.
and how to not try to control and judge and live their life all about the other person.
Right.
So he had been doing that. I did not know. And he said one night, what if this was your last beer? What if this was your last drink? We were at a
Yeah.
restaurant.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. It was the moment. I, I said, well, that could happen, because it was at the 6 month point.
Yeah.
And I,
Yeah.
I hadn't been sharing with him my experiment or anything.
Mm-hmm.
And so the next night, he went to an Al Anon meeting and I went to an AA meeting in the same building at the
Mm-hmm.
same time.
Mm-hmm.
And, in those days, the room was full of smoke. It was mostly
Yes.
men.
Yes.
And I walked in, and I guess I was pretty desperate.
Mm-hmm.
And I sat down and I listened. And everybody it was unlike any group I'd ever been in before. They didn't want my money. They didn't get my name to call me and follow up on me.
Mm-hmm.
They welcomed me. They shared their stories. They didn't give advice.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't get me to try to join the group. I mean, it was no coercion at all,
That's
which
great.
I
No
totally
pressure.
welcomed. Yeah.
Right.
And when they talked about this higher power thing, I said, oh, don't worry about that. People have different ways of thinking about it. Don't worry about that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I would say at that moment, because the next day I went to another meeting,
Mm-hmm.
and at that moment I thought, okay, these people were just like me, and many of
Yes.
them worse. And
Yes.
look at them now. They're laughing and happy, and they have their families back, or they have successful relationships, or they've gotten their businesses back, and
Mm-hmm.
they're having happy, successful lives. And that is nothing like what my life looks like to me right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. 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 No, I got you. So, what during this stage here, okay,
Mm-hmm.
as you're going to the appointments, the meetings, and you're, as they say, during doing the work, as you're going through this and doing the work, uh, what was one significant thing you've learned about Gigi uh, in this journey? Something that really kind of like
Well,
was an aha moment or surprised you about yourself.
the first thing, there were several, because that's
Hmm.
what recovery is all about, waking
Right.
up.
Right.
But the first one was, I did not think I was worth anybody else's time.
Mm,
So I attended meetings for 6 weeks, 6 months,
okay.
2 or 3 times a week before I ever asked a woman to be my sponsor and help me work the steps.
I see.
So I was one foot in, one foot out.
Very
And
apprehensive.
I
Yeah.
didn't think, I really was astonished that all these women say, "Oh, I called my sponsor and she get
Hmm.
And I thought, oh, eventually I thought, oh, I want my own sponsor."
Right. Right.
And there had been a woman who really, I liked what she said a lot in the meetings, and
Hmm.
so I got up the courage to ask her, and she said
Hmm.
yes. Then it was this journey of working through, that the whole. I mean, the first three steps are like, okay, there's some wiser, higher self, higher something.
Yes.
But then you get into what are called the house cleaning steps, the inventory and
Right.
our aspects of our character that have been kind of twisted,
Yes.
and making amends. And those steps um, really are designed to awaken. So, one of the things I wanted to say here is that anyone who embarks on a growth journey, whether you don't have an alcohol problem or you don't, but you're not feeling happy, or you know you
Right.
want to feel more functional and happier.
Yes.
Um, that that it the misconception is, if I open this can of worms by going to therapy or by getting in recovery or by joining this growth group or whatever, I'm going to rip the Band-Aid off. All the pain's going to come rushing out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, because I think so many of us who have troubled lives have a feeling there's something down in there that
Right.
at least must be bad, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, and what I wanted to say was that that was not my experience. It didn't come rushing out all at once. It came out in layers. So
Yes.
my first house cleaning, I realized, oh, I speak to myself in my head with the most critical voice.
Mm-hmm.
Why didn't I do that? Do they like me? All about how I looked to the world
Yeah.
and whether I was coming up short and whether I was better than somebody else. And of course, you start learning that I am so self-centered
Right.
and insecure.
Oh
So
yeah.
then, this idea of a power greater than my fears started kind of growing. And then I started thinking, okay, my worth is established by, my higher self. It's not
Mm-hmm.
the old self that used to run the show. There's a better version we're growing here
Yes. Yes. Yes.
that can,
Absolutely.
yeah, that I can turn to.
Uh-huh.
The next layer was all about growing up in my alcoholic home and all the twisted ways it had left me about relationships and
Mm-hmm.
standing
Mm-hmm.
up for myself, or not standing up for myself, and talking, honestly with people about feelings, setting boundaries. I didn't know any of that stuff.
Right. Right.
And so I went to Adult Children of Alcoholics, which is a really good 12-step program.
Mm-hmm.
And here's what I didn't know. The third layer was around me having waking up one morning with my dad's hand on my breast,
Mm.
with some ways that my dad continued to um, hug
Yeah.
the myself and my two sisters as adults. He was
Mm.
still hugging us and copying a little feel.
Oh. Oh
I
wow.
mean, and it, and he got away with it. But anyway,
Yeah.
that layer came up, and it just helped explain so much. I was ready. I
Right.
had a very deep anger at men, which I didn't
Sure.
know about.
Okay. Uh-huh.
I was very upset about women who were, abused by men.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I found a new therapist who specialized in that area, and she
Mm-hmm.
had a sexual healing group, and we worked through all these things. And ultimately, I was able to claim my power by asking to meet with my father. I never had to tell him the effects of what he did.
Right.
I just said, when you hug me that way and put your thumb on my breast, it really makes me uncomfortable, and I'd like to ask you to stop. And he
Good.
said, oh, okay. And he never did it again.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But nobody talked about it.
No, no, no.
No.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I go so far as to even say, is there need to talk about it afterwards if he said no and never did it? You know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think talk is overrated in terms of talking to the unhealthy person
Yeah.
that was uh, the harming person. That
Yeah.
I Anyway, I would say, those were a series of turning points. Learning to be more kind to myself and loving in my self
Of
talk, and
course.
some of that inner child
Mm-hmm.
soothing and
Mm-hmm.
nurturing, and then all the perfectionism and all that from the dysfunctional family and that whole layer. I kept learning.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's like you're reading my mind because I wanted to take a slight step back and ask you this question surrounding perfectionism. Okay, and then I would love for us to talk about just the great work that you're doing when it comes to finding ourselves or in yourself and others spiritually, healing,
Mhm.
being calm, and so forth. Okay, so um, in part of your story, okay, about Gigi, right? That I saw in getting to know you, I read a certain part that kind of I thought was very poignant, and I'd love it if you could elaborate on that a little bit. And here's what I read. I wrestled with fierce professional jealousies and insecurities, with a tendency toward overwork and perfectionism. Can you explain how chasing perfectionism was like counterproductive actually in your work as a college professor?
Yeah, it's, I think that lifelong, well, the things that hamper us later in life, like
Mm-hmm.
perfectionism, quite
Mm-hmm.
often started out as survival strategies.
Mm-hmm.
So I felt really good being a good student when I was little in that crazy family. And then
Yeah.
as an adult, I carried it over into everything I did, not realizing that I wasn't a little kid anymore that was helpless.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I was on this constant journey to try to prove my worth, prove to myself that I could be secure by all these external things that the world had defined.
I see.
So, and I would say anxiety was a big part of that because when
Mm-hmm.
we're constantly lashing ourselves, you got to do better, you got to do it faster, you got to be better. And coming from Stanford, I went into a regional university. So I felt a little bit like a big fish in a
Yeah,
small
the small
pond.
pond. Yep.
And
Yep.
I got some recognitions quite early.
Sure.
And so I kind of, my ego loved that.
Yeah.
And then this, we recruited new people, and this woman sitting in the office across from me was fabulous, and the students loved her. And all I could hear was them raving about her and praising her.
Yeah.
And on this growth path, if we're hanging with people who are also growing, who
Yeah.
are also working with the same
Mm-hmm.
dysfunctional ways of dealing
Mm-hmm.
with the world,
Mm-hmm.
um, for me, it was a spiritual life, but it could be any growth path where we're connecting with something wiser than just our own self centered fear.
Yeah.
Um, we get these opportunities to grow right in our face.
That's right.
Like it wasn't accidental that she was there. It was time for me to see my professional jealousy and perfectionism and how much I had hung my security on that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So everything, this is kind of cliche, and I don't really like saying this phrase, but everyone says, or not everyone, but there's a lot of people who say everything happens for a reason. But you're saying this was no accident in meeting her. It happened the way it was supposed to happen, so that you can see how you were hanging your securities on on this sort of thing, right? The
Right.
ego and all this, and perfectionism or
Yeah.
seeking perfectionism. I got you. Man, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing that, because we have listeners, I'm sure, who battle with that, and that's a struggle. Some people say, "Oh, you're looking to achieve perfectionism. That's great. You're a hard worker and so forth." But how productive is that really? You know, and how healthy from a mental state is that really in chasing perfection when we as humans really are not perfect, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, so very, very, very thought provoking for sure. All right, so Gigi, I'd love to talk about. Let's draw that bridge, right? I'd love for us to draw the bridge from what you have been recovering from, the meetings, the therapy, and the work that you've been doing through the 12-step program and so forth. Let's draw a bridge from that over to um, where you're leading retreats, right?
Hmm.
Where you're actually developing practical tools so that you can, work on calming yourself, becoming wiser, more introspective and retrospective, and then helping others. Let's draw that bridge if you can.
Thank you. Um, well, just one way of helping those who are listening is
Hmm.
that if we talk about what are some of the biggest problems people encounter, one
Hmm.
of them is that perfectionism, anxiety,
Hmm.
stress, and another is dysfunctional relationships
Yes.
of any sort. And I just wanted to say that um, if anyone's suffering with those, at the Al Anon Family Groups program, Al-Anon,
Mm-hmm.
ALANON.org,
Mm-hmm.
they deal with all those issues, codependency, uh, any kind of really difficulty with family members, even if there's not an alcoholic involved.
Yes.
So, anyway,
Mm.
um, yes, I love giving back. I did not at first. I was trying to get everything I wanted before I
Right.
quit drinking. Of course, the 12-step programs end with step 12, where you're supposed to give it away to keep it, which is a universal principle, really, when you think of it. What we send out comes back.
Mm-hmm.
So, in all of this stuff with the law of attraction, and there's manifestation, positive thinking, there's a huge research base on those things. So, but I was kind of socialized in my 12-step program to start, if someone asked me to sponsor them,
Yeah.
to take them through the steps, I was supposed to say yes, and then I would consult my sponsor for advice on how to work with them.
Oh, great. Yes.
Um, so I had been a teacher, I love teaching. So I
Yeah.
was already really into trying to explain things well and help
Mm-hmm.
people grow and so on. So I think it's always been something I cared about.
Mm-hmm.
What happened is each of these challenges and these layers that I mentioned, whether it
Yeah.
was divorce, chronic pain, codependency, professional jealousy, blah, 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 I went beyond the 12 steps, because
Mm.
the 11th step, which says seek to improve our conscious contact with a power greater than our fear,
Yes.
um, it invites us to throw the net widely. So when
Mm.
I had chronic pain, I had two frozen shoulders. I discovered Pema Chodron and some of her Buddhist teachings, and we can put these things in the show notes. I'll give them to you.
Awesome.
And the idea of staying in the now rather than the future or the past.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So everything that I ended up putting in my book is the tools that I learned through one of my struggles.
Beautiful.
So
Yes.
it's structured so that
Mm-hmm.
it says there's here's what happened to me. Not a big long story, but
Yeah.
here's how I really got myself miserable, or
Mm-hmm.
life
Mm-hmm.
happened to me and I became miserable.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
here are the tools that I found, and here's how I
Yes.
used them, and here's how they helped me.
Mm.
So obviously there are spiritual tools in there,
Right.
prayer, meditation, etc.
Yes.
But one of the things that I discovered when I had the shoulders, and then also when I was dealing with the sexual abuse, was energy work,
Mm. Okay.
which is like it's a whole umbrella for the tapping therapy,
Mm-hmm.
EMDR, which is a therapy mode,
Mm-hmm.
uses some energy work with it.
Mm-hmm.
Reiki is an energy healing
I've heard of Reiki.
modality.
Mm-hmm.
And I found quite a bit of help with those
Mm-hmm.
kinds of tools. So, cranial sacral therapy
Mm-hmm.
also. So, in addition to those energy tools and um, these spiritual tools, there's also all of the stuff about brain reprogramming.
Mm-hmm.
Wayne Dyer started us talking about it. He
Mm-hmm.
wasn't talking, he always had a little spiritual edge there, but it was really about, if you want to make your life different, you have to think differently.
Yes.
And one of the most hopeful points I discovered was that I have complete control over what my mind focuses on. Now, is that empowering or not? I thought I was stuck being the way I had been,
Yes.
and that is not true at all. And it's not like I can will myself and force myself to heal or be better, but I can use my willpower to get myself around positive people,
That's right.
to read positive, engaging blogs, listen to podcasts. I
Mm-hmm.
can fill my mind with
Yes.
lots of influential, good messages to counteract the old patterns, which the old patterns I call whispered lies.
Yes.
You can't do this,
Mm-hmm.
they won't like you, and you should or you shouldn't. And really, there's a whole chapter on the law of attraction and writing affirmations. I
Okay.
used a vision board to write my book. I
Very
had it
good.
right there in front of me with the book
Mm-hmm.
finished and the computer. And
Mm-hmm.
so I guess before I wrote the book, so that I started it in 2011 or 12, and I had,
Yes.
all these ideas. Then things happened in between, so it got delayed. But before that, I had been asked to do a couple of retreats because I was articulate, and I was a teacher. And people asked me, and I just loved doing them. And one of the ones I did was two of the steps of the 12 is 6, where we become entirely ready to live without our negative patterns,
Yes.
and 7, where we ask this higher self, higher power to remove them. And uh, anyway, I do a step on Drop the Rock, which is a book deals with that. But I just loved doing that. And then when I wrote my book, I started doing workshops on the book,
Mm-hmm.
sharing the tools. Um, yeah, I love helping other people. And now that I'm retired, it's such a gift. And again, when we dedicate ourselves to be of maximum service to a higher something, uh, and one another, you
Yeah.
know, let's love one another, right? When we
Mm-hmm.
daily make that declaration and say, then the most amazing things happen. I wasn't thinking of writing a book, but I'm on the airplane. I'm thinking, wow, I just had this visit with my mother, and what an amazing time we had. And isn't that a huge difference from 10 years ago
Right.
when and so I thought, gee, what if I wrote a book about all the things I've learned that in a way that other people could use them too. So it's not just for
Yes.
people in recovery.
Right.
Yeah.
No, that's great. That's great. And you kind of touched on something I wanted to ask. And I know I have a good feeling that this is in your book, um, and part of what you practice in helping others. So these practical tools and these methods that you write about and that you have demonstrated and practiced yourself, um, while while they were uh, while they were and are things that you learned based on your journey and lessons that you've learned, to to help get past your past, so to
Very
speak.
good.
Um, uh, uh, are there any of these practices that you have seen a benefit or felt a benefit on in your relationships as you move forward? I guess is what I'm trying to ask.
Yeah. Any problem is not best approached through an anxious, worried, freaked out mind that's projecting disaster in the future and drawing on the past to
Hmm.
think, to interpret something in a particular way according to our fears.
Hmm.
Nothing is helped by that. So, any tool that can
Hmm.
help us calm down.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so, I think one of the most powerful, and it's the research, I had to look up the research on everything I suggest and include a sentence or two, But I mean, look at the research on meditation.
Yeah.
It's the mindfulness meditation that they've done the research on at University of Massachusetts.
Hmm.
And here's what's interesting about it. Everyone says, well, I can't meditate because I can't quiet my thoughts. It isn't about quieting our
No,
thoughts.
that's exactly right.
It's about noticing one thought and substituting another.
Yes.
Focus.
Yes.
Well, think how that skill can generalize to us with our self talk.
Hmm. Hmm.
So when I notice myself thinking and then I notice, oh my God, I'm projecting fear into the future, I can, because I've been meditating and noticing my thoughts and
Hmm.
practicing redirecting them,
Hmm.
I can
Hmm.
I can say a mantra, I can say an affirmation, I can do so many things instead of worry. So
Gotcha.
that brings peace of mind.
Yes.
And so in any problem solving, the first thing is to get myself unstuck from the ceiling, right?
Right. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
Mm-hmm.
because my perspective is whacked by my fear and by my
Right.
past, right?
Right.
And
Right.
then, as I get calmer and start connecting with something bigger than my fears
Mm-hmm.
and talking with other people and healthy people and
Mm-hmm.
maybe reading, but not over analyzing, just opening it up, loosening the soil for some inspiration to come into it.
I see.
We quite often either don't need to change the situation because we've come to accept it. We're not so hooked into it, or we get just the right words at just the right time. It's it's really amazing how those
Wow.
things work. Yeah,
Man, that's that is amazing how that works,
yeah, yeah.
and these are tools that anyone can use.
Hmm.
Yeah. So, Gigi, how can the listeners connect with you, learn more about the great work you're doing, and get a glimpse, another maybe a deeper glimpse into your story?
I have a website,
Mm-hmm.
and it's Gigi Langer. So it's GIGILANGER
Okay. Mm-hmm.
dot com. And I have a blog that I've been doing for about 3 years now.
Oh, great.
And my book, the best deal for my book is on my website because I
Okay.
will send a personalized signed copy of the print copy. It is way less than it is on Amazon.
Oh,
And so there's a way to purchase that. And then
okay.
there's also the links for the audiobook and the ebook. And yeah, and there's more information about me and my background in education, things like that. And
Yes.
there's a contact me, and I do get those and I respond to them. And
Good.
I love to interact with people
Good.
because I'm retired. I have time.
I hear you. So, yeah, we will definitely make sure that we include all those links to your website, the audiobooks, and where on your website is the best place to get the book to get that autographed copy
Yep.
in the episode show notes, so that our listeners can directly click those links and be redirected to your website and learn more about Gigi Langer. So, Gigi, I tell you, I have to truly, truly commend you and thank you seriously from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for making yourself vulnerable, opening yourself up, not just to me and the listeners, but in the work that you're doing, in the writing of your book, in the helping of people that you work with. Again, all in the spirit of helping others, making ourselves vulnerable. I truly, truly believe in my heart of hearts that there is power in vulnerability, and you embody that. You demonstrate that. And I just want to thank you for sharing that with us today.
Thank you so much, Aubrey. I've loved every minute of it, and I would love to stay in touch with you and your
Oh,
listeners.
yes, absolutely. I would truly, truly be delighted if we can stay in touch. Love to have you back on the show, maybe 6 to 8 months, and
Great.
get an update on what's going on in Gigi's life.
Sure. And I can teach a few more of the tools too,
Yes,
specifics. Yeah.
yes, we can keep that momentum going for
Great.
sure.
Great.
Absolutely. So, Gigi, we are now about to enter a segment I like to call Three for the Road. And in Three for the Road, that's where I ask three random yet thought provoking questions that I challenge my guests to answer in 5 words or less. So, what do you say? You think you're up for it?
I'm up for it.
All right, fantastic. Okay, so Three for the Road. Here we go. We're going to kick us off with question number one. Here we go. What is your core, your absolute core message behind 50 Ways to Worry Less Now?
Become connected to wisdom first.
Become
Become
connected
connected to
to
wisdom
wisdom
first.
first. Love it. Love it. Fantastic. Awesome, Gigi. Okay, question number two. When working with people struggling with addiction and bad habits and behavior, do you find that they are running away from something or running towards something, and why?
They don't like life at all.
Okay. All right. Okay. I like it. I like it. They don't like life at all. And there's a rediscovery they have to come to, right? And it may, in most cases, require help from others to have that rediscovery, to find that rediscovery, and to end up enjoying life, right?
Yep, absolutely essential. We can't do it alone.
No. Okay. That makes sense. That makes sense. All right. So, question number three to top us off for three for the road. Let's see here. Okay, this is going to be easy. Fill in the blank. Okay, fill in the blank. Sobriety has given me and those around me.
5 words:
Yes.
freedom, happiness, fellowship,
Mhm.
trust,
Mhm.
life. Trusting life.
Trusting life.
Yeah,
Freedom, happiness,
fellowship.
fellowship, trusting life.
Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful, Gigi. I love it. I mean, those are five simple words that says and means so much, right? That's all
Mm,
we really want in life. You know, we go different paths to get to it, but that's all we as humans really want out of life.
right.
Gigi Langer, thank you so much for coming on the show and chatting with us. Really, really appreciated the time. I really enjoyed myself in our conversation.
Me too. Me too. It was wonderful. Thanks so much.
Oh, absolutely. And I want to thank all of you for tuning in and listening. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. We're on Apple Podcasts, we're on Spotify, we're on Libsyn, we're on Spreaker, iHeartRadio, anywhere you listen to your shows. All right. But more importantly, if you know someone who appears to be at the end of their rope, who looks as if they have no direction to go, nowhere to turn, please share this show with them. Please share this show with them because on the road to rediscovery, we want these individuals to understand two things. Number one, you are not alone. And number two, there is always, always hope around the corner. The road to rediscovery, it's a movement, a revolution. And guess what? You are now part of it. We're all roadies on this journey of life. And it sure feels good having you on the road with me. Thanks again for listening. We'll chat again soon.
The Road to Rediscovery is an AJ Sharp production